Hello, everyone, and welcome to Johnny's Ambassadors Expert Webinar Series for Parents. I am your host, Laura Stack. I am the CEO and founder of Johnny's Ambassadors, where we educate parents and teens on the dangers of today's high THC marijuana, on adolescent brain development, mental illness, and suicide. With me, we have a very special guest whom I will introduce in just a moment after we go through a couple quick logistical details. This session is being recorded. Please share it with your friends and family. James has kindly provided a handout today, which is a PDF of his slides with room for notes. You'll find it either on this page where you're watching or in the control panel of GoToWebinar. We are going to be able to ask him questions. He'll reserve a few minutes at the end of his presentation. So there's a question box in the control panel. Please feel free to type them in as you think of them so you don't forget what you want to ask at the end. With that, I will introduce our special guest today, James Henning, whom I'm so excited is here because I have actually known James I think for about 20 years. Yes. We used to work together when he was at the Denver Police Department, and I came in and taught productivity courses back then. So very excited to have him now in this new realm, working with us here at Johnny's Ambassadors. Let me tell you a little bit about James. He served over 31 years with the Denver Police Department and recently retired after attaining the rank of commander. Working his way from patrol to command staff, James worked assignments in training, communications, vice drug administration, and served as the commander of the Investigative Support Division. He was a founding member of the Denver Marijuana Policy Team and worked collaboratively with other city and state agencies and community organizations in the development of these policies. James has made countless presentations concerning the impact of marijuana legalization, and he is here with us today to talk with us. James, thank you so much for being back with me. It's great to have you, and I'm so glad to have you as one of Johnny's ambassadors.
Laura, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and after 20 years, I had no idea, we had no idea where we'd be 20 years later and that we would be talking about marijuana. Back in 2012, I was a lieutenant. I had just been sent as a lieutenant to the Narcotics Bureau, and they sent me to a meeting with commanders across the state. And somebody got up and said, hey, there's an initiative on the state for the state constitution that they're going to legalize small amounts of recreational marijuana. And I was like, that'll never happen, never happen. It happened. And that was the start. It was really a tidal wave that took out pretty much every agency in the city of Denver. It impacted us across the board, every single agency. And I was there from the start, working with them, working through all the problems. We never saw any of the problems that we got hit with. And I was there working my way through it. And as I did that, seeing the explosion in the illicit market, the black market, seeing the problems with home grows, seeing the impact on our kids and all of that, it's been quite a ride. And I have a tough act to follow. Laura has been able to put together experts that bar none are of the highest level. I've been across the country and seen speakers across the United States, and I can tell you, I can assure you that the resources that Laura's put together are really second to none. So I would say thank you, Laura, for doing that. I don't come to you as a PhD. I don't come to you as a psychologist. I'm not an academic doing studies. I'm kind of the cop on the ground that had to deal with this stuff. And as I watched the various seminars with Johnny's Ambassadors, I realized I can bring more information to the table. So what I'm trying to do with my presentation is really broaden that foundation of knowledge that you have about marijuana, because if you're going to stand up to the industry, if you're going to deal with the industry and deal with proponents of marijuana, you need to understand as much about it as you can. Just knowing the impact on adolescents is great, but you have to have a full understanding, because these people are smart, they know what they're doing, and they will come at you from another direction. So in light of that, I'm going to talk to you really about three things. One is the production of marijuana, how much you can produce and what's that worth. The other is, how do they actually get concentrates? How are concentrates made? I'll touch on that. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about drug endangered children at the end, because that's another facet that, you know, we just heard about the impact on adolescents about 7, 8 years ago. Well, now we're just hearing about the impact on kids that are impacted by being a drug endangered child. So let's get right into it. A lot of questions about, you know, why on earth would you grow marijuana? You can go down to the street corner and you can buy marijuana in Denver anytime you want. Well, some people grow up because it's a hobby. We're talking about a lifestyle. People think about marijuana all day long. They get up, they get high. They deal with their friends. They talk to their friends about marijuana. It's an entire culture. So a natural extension of that culture really is the hobby of producing marijuana and producing concentrates and all of that. Some people do it to save money. Some people will grow a few plants in their basement and they think they can save money over purchasing it. Some people do it to produce their own medicine, right? They don't feel like they can go to a dispensary and purchase the right type of medicine to treat them or their children. But quite honestly, the overwhelming reason to do it is to make money for the illicit market. And I'm going to show you how much you can make here in a second. Usually it starts out, a guy is growing marijuana for himself, and then he gives a little bit to his friends, and then he grows a little bit more for himself and he sells a little bit to his friends, and then he grows a little bit more and he's selling some to his friends and his friends' friends, and before you know it, he set up an entire criminal network to distribute marijuana across the United States. I remember when this whole thing started, people kept telling us that they were getting the cartels out of the marijuana business. I'm here to tell you, we didn't have cartels in the marijuana business back in 2010, 2011. We do now, but we didn't back then. So let me show you why. One of the biggest misperceptions about how much marijuana you can grow is everyone thinks it's about plants. If you grow 100 plants, you can grow so much. Really, it's not about number of plants. It's about lighting. Lighting is your limited factor. So you can grow one great big plant, or you can grow a whole bunch of little plants, but you're only going to get so much of that flower off of the top of the marijuana plant. So it's about converting so much light into marijuana plant material. How does that work? The general rule of thumb right now in the industry is if you pump 30 to 65 watts of light per square foot in your grow, so 30 to 65 watts, that much light per square foot, you're going to get about 1 gram of flower per watt, and you'll harvest that 4 or 5 times a year. So what does the math look like on that? If you have 1,000 square foot grow, which I like to say that's that unfinished basement in Colorado, 1,000 square foot unfinished basement, 50 watts per square foot equals 50,000 grams. That's 111 pounds of marijuana. So what is a pound of marijuana? Well, an ounce of marijuana is basically a baggie about yay big, right? It's about that big, maybe the size of your eyeglass case. A pound of marijuana is about a gallon baggie sucked down tight. So about a gallon Ziploc bag sucked down tight. So imagine 111 of those. Now imagine 444 of those, right? That's because you're gonna harvest 4 times a year. So 444 pounds a year, and you look at the sliding glass door behind me, it would go pile it up against that door. It would be a stack probably about as tall as I am, 444 pounds of marijuana. That's coming out of one basement per year. So what's that worth? Really, I'm asking you, what's it worth for you to give up your basement? Okay, so If this was Mexican, what we call Mexican brickweed, the weed, the get giggly and go to Taco Bell weed you smoked back in college, that's worth about $400 a pound right now. So at that price, you're looking at about $177,000 coming out of the basement. Pretty good profit, pretty good payday. But remember, we're not talking about 2 to 3% THC. We're talking Colorado high-grade marijuana, which is what these growers are producing, 17+% THC. And right now that's going, I talked to the detectives last week, about $1,200 a pound. So at that price, you're looking at over $500,000 of marijuana coming out of that grow, coming out of that basement. Now, let me ask you, how many people would give up their basement for $500,000 a year? There's quite a lot of them, but then they'd still be selling out cheap. That same price for that same pound of marijuana, that high-grade marijuana on the East Coast is $3,000. $3,000 a pound equals $1.3 million. Now, let's say I'm crazy. Let's say there's no way you can get that much marijuana out of your basement. Cut it in half. Think of how many people would kill each other for $750,000, say. And that's where we ran into the problems, not just with the license industry, but we ran into the problems with the illicit black market, with very organized groups growing marijuana and distributing it across the United States. So that's kind of set up the problem. So what are our growers doing? How do we grow marijuana? Well, first off, you have to understand it's going back to your freshman year in high school biology. You're converting light, water, nutrients or fertilizer, and CO2. You're converting that into plant material. And quite honestly, you don't care about any part of the plant. You don't care about the stem or the leaves. You want the flower. You want this part right up here. And then even more specifically than that, you want the trichomes. You want these little stems right here, microscopically, you can see them. And it's like a little stem with a light bulb on it. And inside that, that's where all the cannabinoids are. CBD, THC being 2 out of 68 to 100, depending on who you talk to. That's what you want. That's what you're growing for. So you want to produce that as quickly and as efficiently and as cheaply as possible. So where are we going here? We're going to grow. What do we need? Well, we need space. In Denver, that's indoors. That's indoors, and I'll tell you why. You need electricity. You're going to need a lot of electricity depending on your lighting. That's not so hard because you can actually steal electricity. I could teach you about that. Lighting, most the major growers are going to LED lighting, but still using a lot of halogen. You need water. Water is a big deal in Colorado. You can't just grow outdoors without water rights. Clones, you need clones. We're going to talk about what clones are. Pesticides. When this first started, we didn't realize what a big problem pesticides were. We actually found out that some of the plant material we were getting early on had actually more pesticide in the plant that you were going to smoke than it had THC. And there are certain studies coming out of California that depending on how you smoke it, up to 70% of that of the pesticides go into your lungs. Then you need fertilizer, and then you need knowledge. And where are you going to get knowledge? You're going to go to YouTube for that. That's all an easy lift. Now I could do hours on the hazards that these present and how home grows are operated and why this is so hazardous to the house, to the neighbors, and to the neighborhood. But just suffice to say here, there's a lot of hazards that come along with the process. A lot of people ask, why grow indoors? Why not just grow outdoors? Well, here's why. You have to understand the life cycle of the plant. In nature, the cannabis plant, it starts growing, the seeds in the ground, and it starts growing in early spring. And as you get more sunlight and water throughout spring and summer, it's growing like crazy. It's growing and growing and growing. And then later in the summer, the light comes back. When it starts to become fall, the light dials back. The plant says, I'm not getting as much sunlight, I better flower. So it flowers, the male plant pollinates it, it goes, drops its seeds, and then the cycle starts all over again the next year. So that life cycle, if you grow outdoors, you get one of those a year. Plus, you can't control your grow. You can't control who's climbing over the fence. You can't control predators. You can't control pests, any of that. If you grow indoors, now you can run that cycle probably 4, maybe even 5 times a year. You can harvest that many more times. You can control the lighting. You can control the water, the fertilizer, the pests, and all of that. So there's huge advantages to growing indoors. So that's the plant life cycle. So how do we start? Well, you start with mother plants and clones. Everyone always talked about seeds when we first started, and generally you don't use seeds to grow because you want every single plant in your grow to be a female plant. The female plant produces the flower. If you have any male plants in there, they will pollinate, shoot off pollen into that grow, and then the flower won't get any bigger because it gets pollinated. That plant will not grow any more flower. It'll just go to seed. So how do we start? Remember, now we're going back to 3rd grade. Basically, you're making clones. You cut a small leaf off of here and you put it in a fertilizer water bath and wait for it to root. So these are lighting over a little fertilizer bath over these little clones, and they're an exact genetic clone of this mother plant. And you'll find these in a separate room a lot of times in the grow. And once they root, you're going to take it to the next stage, which is the seedling vegetative stage. And basically put it in a pot and let it grow. And through this stage, you're going to pump the light to it, 16 hours of light a day. You want to put mass on that plant. You want to grow it fast. And you'll do this for a couple of months until you get it up to 2-3 feet tall. And the whole idea is just to get that plant big enough to start producing flower. And then you want to take this to the flowering stage, or one more stage before that. These are some indoor grows, some illegal indoor grows, and if you take a look, you can see different size pots. Every grower has different techniques. You can see the lighting up here. These are halogen lights, and if you notice, there's venting going between each one. They get very hot, so they have to pump air from light to light to light, and then they vent it outdoors many times, and that's why you get that skunky smell in the neighborhood from marijuana grows, especially when it's in flower. Okay, so you've grown this plant, and after you get it to so much size, you want to trim it and train it. Again, you don't want these lower leaves. You cut all these lower leaves off. You train the plant so it's a nice broad canopy across your grow so the light is evenly hitting it. And then you use these stakes or this netting to support the plant to keep those stems up where you want them to flower, but also to keep them from toppling over as that flower gets real big. Okay, and remember, you can grow one great big giant plant, or you can grow a whole bunch of little plants, but you're only going to get so much of this flower for the lighting. Okay, then the flowering stage, we talked about that. You crank back on the light, and that plant really starts growing the flower, and you're pumping a lot of light and water and CO2 to it, and you're getting as big of those buds as you can. This is Jeff Massalangelo over here. He's a sergeant, the Denver marijuana team. We had to go from 4 detectives and one sergeant dealing with marijuana in 2012. At our peak, about 2 years ago, we had 11 or 12 detectives, and we had 3 sergeants dealing with legalization of marijuana and the illicit market for marijuana. And we were PPE before it's cool. Some of the hazards that you have in a marijuana grow, molds are a very serious hazard, electrical hazards, pesticide hazards, building codes, bad guys, booby traps, weapons. They can be unlawful, unlicensed grows can be very dangerous places. Okay, so then you're going to harvest it. A couple different ways you can do this. The growers will just cut the stems with the flower and dry those whole. This guy is doing it in his closet. Takes a few weeks for it to dry out. You can never have enough hangers, I guess. And then over here, you can dry it. You can cut all the little buds off of the flower and then just dry the buds. And growers prefer different techniques, but that's two methods. Okay, then you're going to trim your flower, and what they do is all those little extra tiny leaves in the flower, they cut that off, and those still have a fair amount of CBD, and they will also break off. So that's what's called shake and trim, and the licensed growers will turn that into joints, or they'll use that for extracts. But you clean up the flower, and then you're going to package it for sale. These are 1 pound bags packaged for sale, vacuum packaged down. Here it is packed in a box, ready for shipment. And then, or the old duffel bag. This is a duffel bag full of weed, usually about 20 pounds per duffel bag. And if you throw this in the back of your SUV and drive the speed limit and take that to the East Coast, that duffel bag's worth about $60,000 in cash. And you're not paying taxes on the cash. We have a lot of issues with internet sales of marijuana and the unlawful sale of marijuana through the internet. It's an all cash business. And here's two probably 15-pound duffels. So about $30,000 of marijuana right there. And then all cash leads to a lot of weapons. It leads to a lot of violence. And these guys, they like their guns. They have they have minimal criminal records a lot of times, so they can purchase a lot of very high quality weapons. The trade in marijuana is probably one of the most dangerous drug trades there are, certainly in the state of Colorado, going back the last 5 or 6 years. Excuse me. In 2017, the city of Denver, we had 56 homicides. Of those 56 homicides, 7 of them were directly related to drug ripoffs for marijuana deals or people defending their home grows. So it can get pretty violent across the board. And we took a lot of steps as a police department to address some of this, and we were able to get that 7 homicides down. But still high impact on some very violent crime. We can talk about crime stats and everything else at another time. It's a fascinating prospect. Okay, so that's mostly home grows, illegal grows. How do the pros do it? So the pros pretty much do it the same way, okay? Remember, marijuana is easy to grow. It's hard to grow well. It's really hard to grow really, really well. What the top producers in the industry are doing, they are growing more but smaller plants, right? They want to keep that crop small. They want to get them to flower more and more quickly, and that limits their risk because if you've got 6-8 months into a plant and it catches disease or pests, now you really have a problem. So it limits your risk there. It provides flexibility for the marketplace so that you can turn your crop over quickly to meet market demand. And then less vertical space, and I'll show you why that's important, because they're growing by the tier. Couple quick interesting facts. In 2013, it was 90% flower sales. Now that's 50%, 20% edibles, 20% concentrates, and 10% others. That's salves, lotions, that kind of stuff. And then finally, they have the metric seed to sale tracking. And everybody touts this. We're going to track marijuana from its seedling stage all the way till when it's sold. Yeah, they do. But what you have to understand is it's only as good as your monitoring and your enforcement. If you can figure out a way to cheat on your income taxes, you can figure out a way to cheat in the metric system. The metric is, again, it's very good. It provides advantages to the growers to actually utilize it, but it's only as good as the data going into the system. So industry grows real quick. They're double tiered. You can see this. They generally use pesticide-free techniques as they're going to with predator insects because of so much pressure with contaminants to the products. They carry numerous strains, and they will grow different strains for marketing demand. Going to LED lights, you can see the LED lights here. It gives them a lot less electricity, a lot less heat, and more control over the light spectrum. Fertigation, what they're doing is they are growing in, I'll show you one of these pots here in a second. They're growing in fiberglass pots, and they're pumping water to that plant 20 to 30 times a day. And then they're using CO2. So the next limiting factor is CO2. If you increase CO2 in this grow while the lights are on, you can increase productivity and growth by 30%. Well, that's another harvest or harvest and a half every year. So here's one of the rock wool plants. You can see this is the metric RFID tag with another tag denoting this is a medical marijuana plant. So that's the metric tab. They do not grow their plants very big. They keep them small. They only plant them once. They don't replant them. Over here, you can see the water system with its fertilizer and water mixed together and how complicated this system is. And they are pumping it to every plant through this little pipe 20 to 30 times a day. So two-tier racking, if you notice, here's a guy working on the upper level, and he's Tyvek'd out. They're very concerned about cross-contamination throughout their grow and all of that. Again, same thing, using the netting to support the flower, and they're pumping that water to them. So that's how the growers do it. Their yields, from what I've seen, their yields are about maybe 15–20% higher than what I described to you. So they're going to get yields even higher than your basic home grower. Okay, so that's kind of how to produce it and where we're going with it. And I'm going to give you a homework assignment about dabbing. This is how to dab with Uncle Buck. Go to YouTube, look this up. This guy can teach you more about dabbing and concentrates in 3 minutes than I could in 3 hours. So take a few minutes, watch how to dab with Uncle Buck. He's going to show you how to do it, but watch for a couple things. Number one is watch how fast this guy gets stoned after he takes a hit. Watch his eyes. That'll tell you how powerful this is. The other thing is watch how into this guy is. This is his life, okay? And watch how focused he is on marijuana, and then ask yourself a question. Who's teaching your kid, your teenager, about marijuana? Is it you? Is it an ad campaign, an anti-marijuana ad campaign? Or is it a guy like this? My guess is it's a guy like this. So the more knowledge you have about all of this, the better you're going to be able to combat the information that this guy's putting out there. So that's your homework assignment. I will remind you of that here in a few minutes. Okay, so remember, the only reason we're growing those plants is to get the trichomes. And now we have to get the trichome and the CBD. We're going to extract. We're going to get the high concentrate marijuana product, and we're going to extract the CBD from these little tiny light bulbs that are on the plant. So how do we do that? There's really 3 ways we can do that, right? Number 1 is we can squeeze it out. Number 2, we can break it off. And number 3, the one that presents us with big problems, is you can dissolve it out. So let me show you what each one of those looks like. Number 1, we can squeeze it out. We can make ROSINS and RESINS. And here's what they're doing. Basically, they have a press, and these are 2 heated plates up here on the press. And you can see the jack, and they very carefully put the marijuana product into this mesh bag. And then they insert it between those plates, between wax paper, and then they're just squeezing it out with the heat and the pressure. and it just squeezes it out, and what you get is this goo runs out of it, and that's the resins or rosins, depending on how you want to, what you want to call it, and you can dab that directly, and Uncle Buck's going to teach you how to do that, by the way. Okay, so that's very high concentrated, 40–50% THC. You've removed all the plant material from that, and you're just getting the high concentrate substance that's in the trichome. Okay, so that's squeeze it out. You can also break it off, and what you do here is you take that the flower, marijuana flower with the trichomes, and you put that into either an ice bath. This is a little ice bath machine, or into a mesh bag with dry ice. And all you're doing is the freezing and the cold action breaks that little trichome off, and you filter it out, or you shake that dry ice bag, and you get all of these. These are all the little trichomes, and you scrape them up, and you can press those into hash. And this is called bubble hash, by the way. And these are these big old chunks here, and then you can smoke that at that point. Again, very high THC, or you can further refine it from there. Now let's talk about the problem child of this whole thing. First off is you can dissolve it out. And here's what's happening with butane hash oil. That's where everybody talks about butane hash oil. Right here, basically in the simplest form, you take a pipe and you fill it with marijuana. We never knew any of this back in 2012, 2013. You fill it with marijuana, there's a filter on this end and a hole on this end. And what this guy is doing is inserting butane, which is lighter fluid, lighter refills, and you insert that butane, and that drips down, and it goes by, and each one of those trichomes, it breaks open, and the substance inside dissolves out, and it trickles down, and it comes out down here in the pan, this bubbly brown goo. And the first we saw of this was people were taking this to try to get the bubbly brown goo out of it, and they were putting it into the freezer, and the cold will bubble the butane out of it. But it filled the refrigerator with butane, and some refrigerators kick off a spark, and the refrigerator would blow up. And we never saw this coming. We never understood what was going on. Another big surprise for us through the legalization of marijuana. So let me show you what that looks like a little bit. Okay, well, rather than a refrigerator, there's other ways you can get it out. One is using a vacuum oven, right? This is kind of the technique now. It vacuums it out, warms it up, and sucks out the butane or the propane or the volatile chemicals. Or you use, over here is a picture of a hot plate with a pressure cooker, and you'll see these as well. So you're further refining it, smoothing it out, getting the gas out of the product by using these two methods. I want you to take a close look, and I want you to remember this photograph, because I'm coming back to this photograph with the mirror here and the table, because we're gonna talk some more about this one here in a few minutes. Okay, so how do they get to that 95% THC? How do they get to that 98, maybe even 100% THC? Well, from those processes, you basically distill it, just like you distill crude oil into kerosene, gasoline, and propane. And you buy yourself a short path distillation system, and you heat up the substance, and at different temperatures, different substances come off. And that's how you get to those really high concentrations of THC. 100% THC or 98% THC really looks like methamphetamines. It's just white crystals. And I don't think many of the users, although they want something very strong to consume, they don't really like this, because I think it tends to be a little harsh for them smoking it and all of that. So it's not like that if they could have it all the time, they necessarily would. So what does this stuff look like in real life? Here is one of the first explosions we have. This was outside of a licensed facility, and they were extracting, you can see all the butane cans, so you kind of appreciate how much gas we're talking about here. 3 or 4 people were out in the backyard of this facility extracting. There was a spark and this whole thing blew up. And this is outdoors, so you understand how much gas was there. These cans were burning off and shooting across the yard like little rockets. This guy was in the news, so I don't mind showing his face. He was at the scene. He admits to that. He suffered some burns, but we were unable to make a case to show his exact involvement in the extractions, and maybe he was just standing there doing nothing. I'm willing to admit that too. So imagine this guy was your neighbor, or imagine this guy was your neighbor. This was a house. It was a basement that blew up. The entire house kind of came up off the foundation, fell back down, and crumbled. What people say, well, what does the guy look like that was inside? That's what the guy looked like that was inside. I think he survived, but obviously severe burns. Imagine he's your neighbor, or maybe this person's your neighbor. Okay, this is a condo in southwest Denver, southeast Denver, I believe, that burned up. You can see this was on the balcony, all the butane canisters and all of that. Now that you know what to look for there, here's your oven that was right in the middle of it where they were further refining the product down. And then here's some of the finished product right here. And understand, people are not doing this for a hobby. They're not doing this for user amounts of high concentrates. They are doing this for the business. They are doing this so that they can compact it. Rather than drive a duffel bag across the country, they can slip this in a manila envelope and ship it across the country and do it a lot less, a lot more safely without getting caught. So this is a business. Don't let anybody tell you, oh no, we have to be able to do this for our medicine. A few people do, but really, we're just getting played. Okay, so how do the pros do it? Well, they use what's called a closed loop system, and this is basically the same system, except they extract the gas back out and then reuse it over and over. And we've had to force them to go to explosion-proof rooms and other fire safety inspections in Denver because it's still a dangerous process. So that's how we extract. That's how they extract and production of marijuana. Now I want to talk about, kind of take a little detour for you and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's drug endangered children. And I don't think anybody's really talking about drug endangered children and marijuana. Quite honestly, a drug endangered child, that kid doesn't care whether it's legal or not. They're impacted by it. And just to read the definition, I hate when people read PowerPoint to me, but it's defined as children who are at risk of suffering physical or emotional harm as a result of drug use, possession, manufacturing, cultivation, or distribution, right? Pretty much all the things I just showed you. They may also be children whose caretaker's substance misuse interferes with the caretaker's ability to parent or provide a safe, nurturing environment. I teach this at the Denver Police Academy, or at least I used to, and you'd ask a group of 40 to 50 officers, recruits, and you'd say, how many of you does this apply to? You don't have to raise your hand, but if you do so. And voluntarily, you'll get 2 or 3 hands will come up, and some of them will actually share how they grew up as a drug endangered child. And it's actually chilling. It's really very sad. And I think we're just, when talking about marijuana, we're just at the cusp of this really becoming important in the studies. And thanks to Johnny's ambassadors, Laura, I was turned on to this study, so I did a little more research. And this is the Texas Department of Protective Services 2020 report. And it was kind of blown through a few times in the previous presentation, so I wanted to slow down just a little bit. So this is 2019 stats. Back in 2019, they had 235 confirmed cases of child abuse and neglect fatalities. So 235 kids died. They had an increase of fatalities in deaths due to drowning, vehicle incidents, and sleep-related practices. So drowning, really, it's being inattentive to your kid, I think, a lot of times. Vehicle-related incidents, I think that's accidents as well as other problems, you know, backing through the driveway, inattentive driving. And then finally, sleep practices. So you sleep with the baby between you, you roll over, and you don't realize that you've smothered the child. Now, of those 112, of the fatalities were due to the caregiver being under the influence or using a substance. And guess what the #1 substance was marijuana at 85 over here. I never would have guessed that it would so outstrip, but it was twice as much as alcohol. Think about that. Everybody talks about children of alcoholics and the dangers to children of alcoholics. Look at the difference. To me, it's stunning. Cocaine is down there, none was even less. And even meth, where all of the drug endangered children stuff came from and started, methamphetamine is no comparison. So let me show you what that looks like, though. Let me show you a few examples. Here's a mild example. This is the marijuana team pulling a grow in a backyard. Unlawful grow. You can't grow in an open space like this in the city of Denver. Obviously, you see the play set, you see all the toys, so more than one kid playing back here. I guess this guy liked to use rat poison around his grow, and he was kind enough to put a baby gate up. You can see his baby gate over here. So I guess that kept the kids out. They can go on the jungle gym, but they can't go over the baby gate. Let me show you a little more stark example here. I'll take you on a little photo tour. This was a small grow in marijuana. A guy was growing in his basement and processing marijuana. This is a shot of his garage. You can see a little bit of dried marijuana and everything on the floor here. This box right here is this box over here, and this was a boxed meth lab. That's a method of cooking meth that's very compact. It's not in favor anymore. We can talk about meth on another time, but it shows you where this guy's head is. He's not only using meth, but he's cooking meth. Now we're going to go from the garage and we're going to go into the house. And if there's any cops watching, you've seen this house about 1,000 times. This is right here going into the house. You've got dog poop on the floor, dog urine. The place is pretty filthy. And then, oh, by the way, a box of diapers right there. That's what we call in the cop business, we call that a clue. Now we look in the living room. And if you take a look in the living room, you look across, and what this guy was doing was he was drying his marijuana on fishing line strung around the house. So then he would hang those stems on the fishing line. The cops said that when you walked in this place, it was like you spilled oregano on the floor of your kitchen. It just crunched when the cops walked around. The detectives were talking about that. Right here, this is a big bag of marijuana that he was processing, that he had harvested. Here on the table, you can see where he was cutting and trimming the bud. Let me give you a little closer look on that. And then toys and marijuana, but he's cutting and trimming the bud right here. And you can see just how much marijuana and dried marijuana is around. And oh yeah, by the way, there's a truck over here on this side of the table, right? A teddy bear, another little toy, a diaper. This kid was about 2.5 years old, a little boy. And then the pot pipe. So we talk about drug endangered children, about kids impacted by their parents using and by their parents producing marijuana and doing all of that. Obviously, this guy's using marijuana in front of his kid. He's probably not that attentive as a parent. So, and little timeout for James here. I got to tell you, I've seen a lot of photographs. I've seen a lot of stuff in 31 years as being a cop. A few stick with you. This is one of those that sticks with me right there. This was on the kitchen counter in the house. You can see it's a plate with little kid marshmallows sprinkled with marijuana. And to me, this is very powerful. This was back in 2014. This kid's probably what? That was 8, 9 years ago. So he's probably 10, 11, or 12 right now. And I think about, where is he now? What is his environment now? He is just about to become an adolescent and start dealing with marijuana. What messages has he learned from his parents? And what is he taking with him through this entire, through growing up? Let me show you one more picture. This is not this kid. This was another case. This is a photo that basically rips my heart out. If you look, remember I told you, remember this table and remember this guy cooking meth. I'm going to show you extracting marijuana. Here's the rest of the table. So on this end, you've got a scale, you've got glassware over here for, so he's producing marijuana to sell it. You don't have a lot of scales for people that are just using it for personal use. So he's extracting using butane hash oil extractions. He's consuming marijuana. He's selling marijuana. And he has a little girl in the house, and out of respect for her, I blocked out her eyes. But if you could see the look on her face, she's about 3 years old, and she's looking off this direction. She's looking off this direction, and what's she looking at? She's looking right here, look in the mirror, the reflection, that's a Denver police officer standing there. So this kid is growing up with parents who are consuming marijuana, growing marijuana, very dangerously extracting, doing butane hash oil extractions. And by the way, it's to such a level that the cops are showing up and coming through the door. This kid's traumatized. This kid is traumatized. And these are the kids that are going to be impacted by marijuana throughout their lives. And the whole point about drug endangered children is every generation it just regenerates, because you have traumatization, you've got more drug use as a result of that traumatization, and then it just keeps going generation after generation. So you think about this little one, and you think about how she's going to be impacted by marijuana. Again, as you can tell, a topic near and dear to my heart. So let's bring it on home here. Again, I'm Commander James Henning. I'm retired. I like to tell everybody I'm ORG, old retired guy. There's my email address, and here's your homework assignment. Well, 2 things now. One is how to dab with Uncle Buck. Take the time to watch that 3-minute video. You'll spend 2 hours surfing through YouTube, seeing all those other videos. You just get into the rabbit hole. And then the second homework assignment is let me know how I can help. Okay, I've got a passion for this. I've seen families impacted by it personally and professionally. What Johnny's Ambassadors is doing, I can't say enough of how important it is. The community, our culture, our society is starting to wake up to the dangers of marijuana, to our adolescents and to our kids. And everyone thinks this is a free ride with free tax money, and it couldn't be anything more. So please fight the good fight. Let me know how I can help. And Laura, that's my piece. What questions do you have?
Wow, James, this is incredible. You have brought a perspective we have not heard on this program in, wow, the 8 months or so since we've been doing these sessions every week. When we talked and we discussed some of the things that you've experienced and have seen, it is heart-wrenching, fascinating just to see the entire process from growing and drying and harvesting, extracting. I mean, we talk about these things, but as lay people, we don't understand what that really looks like
Right.
and how dangerous it is, and just the distillation process, how these higher THC products are created. To me, it was fascinating because I mean, in the past, year and 4 months since Johnny passed, I feel like I've gotten, a clinical of sorts in just learning and research. But I see these products and I didn't really understand what's the difference between resin and bubble hash and, the butane hash oil. And I'm going to go back. I don't know about the others on this call, but watch it again and again until I really feel like I understand. And I think any of us would benefit. You probably still have connections, but being able to go into some of these grows, some of the dispensaries, and really understand, because what I took from your presentation is, like the Uncle Buck, who's teaching your children about marijuana? And you're so right. That's what we're trying to do, at Johnny's Ambassadors, is to educate so that the parents, and concerned adults, counselors, school people, healthcare professionals, we need to be the ones teaching our kids.
That's right.
About this. So I can't thank you enough. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Let's see. One is, thank you for your service.
Sure. Happy to do it. It was a pleasure.
Not a question, but a comment. Thank you. I remember mobile meth labs in the late 80s working in Southern California. Kids are dear to me too, and I could not take them all at home. Oh yeah, I know you. What happens to these children that you encounter? I mean, do they have to go into the foster system?
Usually we have protocols in place to place them into social services. We contact social services, but even that's a heavy lift because, again, you're bumping up against this marijuana culture, this attitude that marijuana is just, the gift from Mother Nature that's going to cure everything. We did this training one time, and then a couple weeks later about what to do about kids in these environments, and the detectives were executing a warrant, and as the sergeant called me, and he said they open the door and so much marijuana smoke pours out of this thing that a little baby, a crawling baby, 2 years old, scoots out beside him and they didn't even see it. And then there's 3 or 4 more kids in the apartment while the parents were downstairs dealing. So he called social services. And he said, okay, this is what I have, and these kids, the parents are dealing, and he describes the whole thing. And she says, okay, so what's the problem? And he said, he laughed, he thought she was joking. And he goes, no, this is the problem.
This is the problem. They're smoking marijuana through secondhand smoke.
And they blew him off. And this guy called the phone to me, and I was able to call up the chain of command, and we were able to battle that one back, and we got those kids into a placement, maybe a temporary placement, but we got them safe for that amount of time. What you described, you're banging your head against a culture and almost a religion, and people just can't imagine the way things are going. People can't imagine that marijuana could be bad. They just don't see it, and that's starting to crack now. Enough families are impacted, going, oh, that's what happened to my kid.
And deciding, we're going to speak out. We won't be silenced.
That's right.
We won't be shamed. We will share the science, the facts. Mm-hmm. These photos are factual, and you just can't argue with that. Let's see. Can you help me understand how the legalization of marijuana led to more black market production? I've known people that grew long before it was legal, so I'm trying to understand the correlation of legalization and the black market, such as people growing in their homes. So how are those two things related?
So that's easy. Yeah, that's easy. All I need is another 7 hours of time. But
you'll have to come back again.
it cracked the door open, and the way medical marijuana, Amendment 20 and Amendment 64 in Colorado for recreational marijuana was structured, it left giant gaps that people could produce huge amounts of marijuana, and the price was so high. When we started this, the price on the East Coast was about $5,000 to $5,500 a pound. So there was huge incentives, and these people could grow marijuana in plain sight. And at one point, there was pretty much nothing we could do about it. So all these criminal organizations became entrenched and began distributing marijuana. So Colorado, we are the little brother to California. California produces most of the illicit marijuana in the United States, but Colorado marijuana is, it's very valuable, and it's the money involved. You can't take a bottle of whiskey from Colorado and triple your money if you take it to the East Coast.
Okay.
There's just so much money involved.
Let's see, states that have medical marijuana encourage patients with kids in foster care to get cards. And that way, when they are hot, they aren't in trouble. Yeah, you know, that was the big challenge. Johnny turned 18 and boom, he's able to get a medical marijuana card simply by saying he's got a migraine, you know.
He's got a headache.
Right. There's a big loophole, you know, that is in the Constitution, you know, that for medical marijuana, you can suddenly have thousands, 4,000 18-year-olds get these med cards, and then they're going and selling it in the high school. What have you seen in that so-called gray market where it's perfectly legal if you have a med card?
I hate the term gray market, and I fight against this every time. Marijuana is either legal or it's not. If I buy marijuana at a dispensary and I buy my amount, that's legal. If I sell it to you, now it's black market marijuana. Now it's illicit marijuana. Gray market kind of makes it like, oh, well, you know, no big deal. It's just gray market marijuana.
Selling it to our friend. Yeah.
When you go and get your MMR 1001, when you go to get your red card, you can go to doctors and they will have a price chart on the wall that says how much you get. And the normal amount, you look at the paper and then they sign it at the bottom and they can check the normal amount of medical marijuana is 2 ounces and 6 plants, unless the doctor says you need more. Well, then they just fill in what need more means. And we have seen these with 4 or 5 pounds of marijuana and up to 100 plants. And so you can go to your caregiver and your caregiver can grow and possess 4 pounds of marijuana and 100 plants. I can grow for you. And then I can grow for you and 4 other people. And no one was tracking who was growing it. So when the cops walk in the door, they go, oh, I have paperwork, it's right here. It says I can grow for Laura Stack 4 pounds and 100 plants. And we'd have to turn around and walk out when you know they're shipping it out. And if you have that red card for 4 pounds, this goes on today. You can walk into that dispensary every single day and buy 4 pounds, 4 pounds.
And then another dispensary because they're not tracking it.
Well, they have tightened up on that, on who's the caregiver. 2 years ago, the state passed some laws because we fought it and we battled it. So that has tightened up. But if I can get 4 pounds a day at $1,200 a pound, and I can send it to my buddy in New York, and he's getting $3,000 a pound, I'm making a lot of money, and all I need is that one little card. And these medical dispensaries are more than happy to ship it out the door. They're more than happy to sell it to them.
Okay, we have time for just a couple more quick questions. Is there any legal action that can be taken if I have a medical marijuana card number on a receipt that I know was used to purchase marijuana to sell to kids? So hard, right?
Yes, but is it ever going to happen?
Yeah.
I suppose you could make a case, but you're going to really have to show intent. And then when it all boils down to it, you're talking about very small amounts of marijuana and nobody's taking that case. You're looking at maybe a petty offense. Right now, people selling pounds of methamphetamine are getting kicked out of the door or not even getting taken to jail. They're just getting a PR bond, and they are out the door. State legislation in Colorado is proposed that will even crank back on that more, that you can't even take someone to jail for drug offenses, felony level drug offenses. All you can do is order them into court. It's the pendulum is still going. We've got to slow it down.
Well, with that, we're out of time. We've got a couple more questions, but we're going to end here. As a final comment, James, maybe you can answer this question. To bring people together who are concerned about the marijuana culture, how do we overcome today's anti-policing movements, and it's just a social justice to legalize movements? Where do we go from here, James? How do we combat this?
If I had that answered, I guess I wouldn't be retired. I'd be getting rich. I don't know. You know what? I think the biggest thing is just keep raising awareness, keep talking to people. When you hear people talking about their kids having issues, you don't pick at it just a little bit, and you'll find that marijuana is under the surface. And you'll find people aren't talking about these issues. They think they're the only ones, and it's heart-wrenching. And when they learn about it, they go, well, yeah, this is a big part of it. And I think more people are coming to the fore. Keep talking to people. We're gonna get there. I'm an optimist. We are gonna get there. We are gonna figure this thing out, and it's an important fight.
Thank you, James. And with your help,
sure,
we are going to get there, because
we are going to
make sure that this recording gets watched by hundreds of people who are going to help us. Thank you for helping us bring attention to this very important issue, especially the impact on our kids. And I hope you'll come back for a session.
You name it, I'll jump in. I'm yours. Thanks, Laura. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for everything, James. Thank you all for joining us on Johnny's Ambassadors.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.